I'm Francis Rose, the host of the Daily Scoop podcast from the Scoop News Group. Cybersecurity in general and zero trust in particular depend more and more on establishing really tight control over who's on your network, what their jobs are, and the privileges they have. Government agencies are focusing more and more on how to stop bad actors from compromising passwords and credentials. Melinda Rogers is the Chief Information Officer at the Department of Justice. Melinda, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. How has the White House executive order on cybersecurity and the push to zero trust reshaped the way that you're thinking about IT security strategies? Welcome, Melinda.
Thank you, Francis. It's nice to see you again. The White House's executive order certainly came at a welcome time for our organization. We at DOJ have been evaluating zero trust even before the publication of the EO. We actually started a small pilot about a year ago looking at ways to extract savings from our networking infrastructure. Certainly the publication of the EO is actually helping us in our endeavor, pushing the initiative into the limelight. And especially now that we have this macro level mandate in place that we are trying to meet and answer the mail for, coincides and nicely with what we had originally intended to explore and pursue and put in place for Justice to enhance our IT security posture. At Justice, we work hard to continue to improve and not be complacent or rest on our laurels. This was one of the things that, like I said, we started to look at, and now really the EO has accelerated our timeline and push for this effort. One of the biggest challenges that we face now is as we look to embrace zero trust within our environment is to look at how do we reconcile the architecture with what we already have in place, which is our optimized trusted internet connections. A few years ago, we at Justice invested significant time, energy, and brainpower towards modernizing our trusted internet connection infrastructure. And with the infusion into the rolling in of zero trust, I think ultimately it's going to be a balancing act of looking at how do we potentially surgically put in place the benefits of each of these frameworks and ultimately figure out how do we use the zero trust framework where it's appropriate and how do we continue to leverage the visibility that the trusted internet connection framework allows us to essentially perform the inspection of traffic to prevent the bad stuff from coming in and the good stuff from going out. So there's a lot more work ahead of us, but it's interesting, it's challenging, and frankly, it's exciting.
When you shifted to remote work, or primarily remote work, like everybody else did 18 months or so ago, how did that change the way that you approached identity, multi-factor authentication, and so on, Melinda?
Well, gosh, yeah, that was certainly almost an overnight exercise. However, we were tracking what was happening in the news with the global pandemic and started fair warning, if you will, by looking at our list of employees and contractors, those with our personal identification verification cards. We can see which ones have cards with certificates expiring, which ones have cards expiring. So we were actually pushing to get a lot of our employees and contractors to renew and up their credentials before what at the time we were anticipating that remote work teleposture. We just didn't anticipate it to be 18 months later, still sort of more or less in this setup. Using multi-factor authentication continues to be an imperative for us, and we continue to align with HSPD 12 requirements, which is using the PIV cards as the second form factor for authentication. We do require it in many of the cases, if not most of all of our employees and contractors to access our networks, our applications, to leverage PIV cards as that second form factor. To date, we are actually at 97% PIV card issuance rate across our entire organization. That is a significant accomplishment. Obviously, we have all of our component offices to thank for their support in making sure that that actually happens, because we do also have offices across the country, across the globe. So it is not a small feat for us to get to this point. Our next steps and focus areas will be on continuing to enhance the implementation of using that second form factor as an authentication mechanism and perpetuating that throughout the organization across all of our systems.
Every organization seems to be facing an explosion of phishing attacks. Melinda, how are you working with your employees, helping to train them up so that they can resist these phishing attacks, help keep them off your network?
That is a longstanding challenge that we've had to deal with, and we continue to deal with. And I have to say, I'm extremely proud of our cybersecurity staff who have continued to put in place different training exercises throughout the years, frankly. And those training exercises have actually become more sophisticated, much like our actors, our adversarial actors as well, where today we're leveraging this training forum where we actually create these phishing emails and we take a person's name. For example, we could send an email to a Francis Rose and see if you will have the propensity to click on that link because it is addressed to you personally. And again, the message there is if it's from an unknown party, you should not be clicking on that. We have seen that take an effect over the years. I mean, this is not an overnight exercise for us. This is just part of our DNA, frankly. We've been pushing those different training modules out every month. Over the years, we cycle through different component offices. We use different themes. I like to use this as an example. One year we had the theme of the email phishing campaign. The training exercise was what's considered an appropriate summer wardrobe for the workplace. Let me tell you, our email campaign lit up like a switchboard because everybody apparently had an opinion to say about that. But that was what's interesting about sort of the human reaction to is our propensity to give our opinion on some of these topics. But the key here is don't click on links that come from entities you're not familiar with. So that is an ongoing effort and one that we at the department take very seriously. And our employees have been, I would say, trained to take that seriously as well. Ultimately, that message comes from the top. It's a tone from our leadership office. They take cybersecurity seriously, and all of our employees take that very seriously as well.
If you have an employee at the Justice Department named Francis Rose, I'd like to meet him. By the way.
Yes.
What are you doing organizationally to help employees create and manage passwords, do it in a stronger way? We still see these reports that people are using password one and stuff like that.
Yes, it's a journey. How's that? We've come very far over the last several years, but we continue to strive towards a passwordless enterprise and organizational approach. Rome is not built in one day, but this is something that we do take very seriously. We actually stopped using user ID and password as a way to gain access into our network several years ago. Francis, you'll remember my predecessor, Joe Klemovich. This started even when he was here, that we went to that PIV card as a second form factor to be used to authenticate oneself into the network. This is especially relevant as we continue to adopt a zero trust architecture. Knowing who is accessing our environment, which devices are accessing our environment, that continues to play a role in helping us achieve that perhaps utopia state of getting to a zero password state. We are looking at different technologies, different processes. I know I talked about the PIV card quite a bit here, but the reality is it is not the end all be all. It can't be a one size fits all either. There are cases where we might have an administrator user with special access to a very unique application where the PIV card is just not compatible. So we have to have a way to find alternatives for that. So while we do have a dominant approach in terms of the lowest common denominator is using PIV cards for everybody wherever we can, wherever that's possible, we are actively working with our component IT offices in collaboration with them to identify those different edge use cases where we might be looking at a PKI-based hardware token or some other form that's not PIV, that's definitely not password, but that can support our mission offices.
Melinda, it's terrific insight. I appreciate you joining me very much today. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you, Francis. It's nice to see you again.